Hi there, Dr. G. So I wanted to go ahead and do a video outline for you really quickly on the lesson plan that I've decided to do for our African American literature course this semester. I am going to choose three different books to do this lesson on, and the lesson is titled A Pinwheel Discussion. I don't know if you've heard of these before, but as a future English teacher myself, I really enjoy this style of discussion. And it does a perfect job of integrating three texts to be analyzed by a class. So the three texts that I'm choosing is the Confessions of Nat Turner, um, the Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, and Behind the Scenes, or 30 Years a Slave and Four in the White House. The reason that I am choosing these three is because of the diversity of characters and also because of the similarities or contrasting um, situations that all three of these people have found themselves in. The reason why I really wanted to do the video to add along with the lesson plan that I will have uploaded for you is I wanted to describe the structure of the pinwheel discussion because I feel that in the lesson plan, as I type it out, it might be a little bit confusing. So hopefully this video doesn't create more confusion, but helps to identify the structure of the intent of this discussion plan. So with the pinwheel discussion, a classroom is going to be broken up into four different groups. Ideally, I would do this with a high school AP Lit group, simply because the amount of reading that would need to be done, or even with a college English or college literature course, or even this course. As a matter of fact, if we willingly are, or hopefully in person here in the future, this is something that could be structured for a course like this. So what would end up happening is that you would split the class into four different groups. Three of the groups would be responsible for the texts themselves. So one group would be for behind the scenes, one would be for Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, and one would be in charge of the Confessions of Nat Turner. So for the pinwheel discussion imagery that I have here on the side, and I'm hoping that this shows up clearly for you, I would refer these to the blue, the yellow, and the red group. So each group would be in charge of just one of those. Um, the fourth group, the green group, would be the discussion facilitator or the questioner group. And the whole purpose of the questioner group is to be the one that initiates the discussion and maintains the discussion going on. Some big ideas and the reasons for this on a high school level in a public school education system is to develop the students' abilities to have interesting or concise dialogue with each other. And so giving the students the ability to actually run the discussion really pulls that out and allows for that situation to occur. It allows the teacher to step out and fully kind of assess all students and their participation as well. And then also in the background, I'll be doing interesting things as the teacher can do interesting things in the background that actually furthers the discussion after that set time of the discussion. So the initial class would start with the teacher or the professor breaking the class up into those groups. The students at this point would have already previously read either the entire books, which in our case, if we were doing this in a college course, you could do this with the books. What I would be doing and which I'll identify in the lesson plan that I'm going to be creating with this is that the students would be given sections of reading for each of these. What I would like to ideally focus on is the aspect of innocence with the children in all three of these books, the childhood that these um, previous slaves or slaves dealt with or had and experienced would be a good thing for the students to read. The next one is ideally they would be reading portions that dealt with individual struggle, and also they would also be reading sections that dealt with the rebellious aspect or the rebellious nature of those, and then also directly with incidents of slavery and results of that slavery would be another thing that they directly deal with. And hopefully those passages would pull those out, and the intent of highlighting and focusing in on those passages, especially for an AP high school lit course, would then be to kind of steer the questioning that would come from the green group into an area of kind of my intentional desire without me actually stepping in and posing those questions myself. What would happen is then, say, if they had a 90-minute course, most high schools around their area have that. The first 15 minutes, the groups would be divided into different portions of the classroom where they would kind of work together to either one, go over their assigned text and kind of just make sure that everyone's on the same page, everyone understands clearly what the text is actually saying and going on. And then I would deal directly with the questioning group or the green group and really focus on them with the whole idea of like hierarchical questions, not just simple basic standard questions, but ones that actually draw out a conversation, kind of explaining to them those different hierarchies of questioning and what's expected of them, what type of questions to ask. They would then, as a group, kind of decide, okay, what type of questions do we want to start with, and how do we want to kind of facilitate the conversation. After those 15 minutes, what would occur is that the students then would sit in the pinwheel structure. So as they come into the classroom, the entire class is actually structured as I have on this pinwheel discussion here. That's why it's called a pinwheel. The classroom desks will be stationed into a pinwheel kind of structure. In the center of the room are 4 different desks, and each group will have an assigned student start, and they would start in that center desk, and those 4 students would be the only ones in the discussion. So everyone else would be completely quiet. They wouldn't be participating in the discussion in any manner. It would just be those 4 students. The green student would initiate the conversation, initiate the discussion, and pose a question to one of the other 3 groups. That person would then would respond and then allow for a discussion between all 4 of them to facilitate. What I would want to see is students from, if the yellow group was posed the question, then I would want to see students from the blue group and the red group kind of intercede into the discussion, talking about how I keep saying character, but how the person in their book, whether it was Linda, if it was Keckley, or even if it was Nat Turner, impose like how they would have either dealt with the situation, how their situation was similar, how their situation might have been different, and kind of create this whole conversation and dynamic of seeing the whole picture over this expanse of characters and life stories. Um, this is a timed section in a 90-minute course. The hopes ideally would be if we had 30 students, that each student would have about 6 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes, ideally, in that center desk. And then as those 6 or 7 minutes are over, as the teacher, I'd say, all right, time's up. And then they would cycle. So the person that's in, let's take the yellow group, for example, the person that is in that center desk then would rotate to one of the back desks of the yellow group, and someone in the front 2 desks, so the yellow group would then move into that seat. Same would happen with all the other groups. And so you get that cycle of students. So every single student gets in, and the next group would either be able to, if they desired to, the green desk desired to, they could continue the discussion on where the last group was, or have the decision to change the question and introduce another question. Again, keeping at these higher levels of questioning. Some questions they could ask would say, how is it that, Keckley's childhood influenced who she might have been when she was in the White House? Or in what ways did you see um, a, a similarity between, I keep saying Linda, but I mean Harriet Jacobs. I should how I should say it. How is it that hers lifestyle as a child and possibly Keckley's were similar, or certain questions like that that would kind of impose certain situations and allow the students to um, dive into that deeper discussion. The whole point of this, as I said earlier, and just to reiterate it with this pinwheel discussion, is to get every single student involved, and then to dive into deep connections and unity between these texts, and to see that this wasn't just isolated events, but to identify the similarities um, between the events and the tragedies of slavery itself, on all different levels, from a woman who lived in the White House to a man who lived in a small country community that was executed, to a woman who was able to free herself from slavery as well and to live essentially an extraordinary life after that as well. Um, from there, something that could be done in the background, and it's not necessary for a teacher, but something that I would like to do is kind of identify key um, topics or key phrases or things that kept getting repeated. And so as I heard something, as I would stand next to the whiteboard out of the way to allow the students to have full control of the discussion. But as they were having that discussion, I would be paying attention to what they were saying. And then I would write, you know, childhood or something on the board indicating a specific thing that they've brought up. And every time that that would get brought up, I would simply write a tally mark underneath of it. So then afterwards, as a whole class, we could observe what were the center lines or what were the biggest kind of conversations that occurred and and essentially what were the biggest topics that occurred around certain conversations throughout the entire discussion. So hopefully within an hour and a half, discussion, the students would be able to see on the whiteboard pretty detailed consistency of discussion and big issue, big topic, so that were reliant throughout. At the very end, because I like to add a writing aspect to it, I would have the students do a reflection of their own choice, either on the discussion itself or over certain topics or events that arose during the discussions. I'd have them do probably between a 5 and 800 word um, personal reflection that every single student would need to turn in at the end there. So that's the intent behind the pinwheel discussion. I really hope I made that clear. I'm going to, obviously you'll see by the time you see this, you're going to see that there is a written lesson plan with it, but hopefully this cleared up some of the stuff that might be confusing in that lesson plan. So thank you, Dr. G, so much for this semester. I truly enjoyed and learned a lot through this class.